The advantage that we have right now at Tesla is that they've sold 6 million cars, and 3.5 or 4 million are collecting data. So the data is what's really valuable. They're doubling their amount of compute. I think we're going to make 20 times in SpaceX over the next 15 years. I think we're going to make a quadruple in the next 6 or 7. But I do think that we're going to get a lot more money to manage, so therefore it's going to get diluted down by the new money coming in, always thinking about how large the position should be. It took me 4 years of doing research before we ultimately decided to invest. And we invested between 2014 and 2016. We invested a total of approximately $400 million, $380 million. In 3 years is when we were buying the stock, and that was it. And the average price, and we've made about 20 times our money since then. We made at the peak, and we've probably made about $5.5 billion in profits so far, and I think we'll make another 5 times in the next 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years. What made us buy it is that he's a mission-driven person. His idea was to try to convert the United States, the world, from using petrol to using electricity. I thought initially it was unlikely he'd be successful. That's when I met him in 2010. 2014, I had become convinced he would become successful. And we invested approximately 2% of our assets at that time, 2% of the 21 or $22 billion that we had under management. We now have about 41 billion. And of the 41 billion, 40 billion is profits that we made for our clients over the past, since 1992. And that ultimately, it's not just going to be a car company, it's not just going to be a battery company, but ultimately all the other car companies, which 50 years ago elected to become much more profitable and outsource supplies and compute to other people, we're going to be, like Intel was inside of computers, this is going to be Tesla inside of cars. All the cars are going to be using Tesla autonomous driving. No one else can possibly compete. I thought the idea had been that you're going to sell a lot of cars. So as a result of that, once they have those cars out there, you'll sell autonomous driving. And he said the other day that he's negotiating to sell autonomous driving for some other cars too. No one has the compute, no one has the data. But I think all the cars are going to be electric. And I think this hybrid is just a sort of a holding off action so the automobile companies. But the electric cars, I think it's going to be all the cars 10, 15 years from now. And I think hybrids, that's not going to last either. They're too expensive they're not effective enough, and they're not going to be part of the mix either. So it's going to be all electric. I was just in California. In the afternoon, I went to Tesla, and I was with the autonomous driving people and also the compute people. The first 11 versions had to be designed so that they had to code every single thing that happened.
Right, and now it's all AI.
It was impossible. And so therefore, they weren't making progress for 2 or 3 years. They were at a plateau. And now what's happened, they have version 12. They have all this enormous amounts of data, and now they have compute to figure out, humans can't do it. Now they have compute to figure everything out. And so now you're on the verge with autonomous driving in your car. So I said, okay, show me. So we go into a parking lot, and we get into the car, and I have an analyst with me, and then they had the compute person, and they had an investor person. And so we're sitting in the car, and so where do you want to go? I said, I want to see Steve Jobs' house. And say, okay, so they punch in the address, and we get into the car drives around by itself. Didn't do it, all we did is punch it in. Drive around the parking lot, goes to the road, there's traffic going both ways. It looks both ways, looking for an entry to get in, gets an entry, pulls in, makes a left-hand turn, then it pulls up, then it makes a left-hand turn, and then goes in front of Steve Jobs' house.
That's a little
creepy. It drove all by itself. Yeah. I don't worry about short term, but I do look around all the time and see everyone getting rich, and I'm not poor, but I haven't made a lot of progress in the last 3 years. So therefore, I think it's like a rubber band. I'm going to catch up again. So what I think about the reason stock is down is because people were concerned that he was going to abandon the idea of having a low-cost car and go all into robo-taxis. That's the reason stock is down. And then there was a report in Reuters said he's canceling this new factory that's going to make low-cost cars, $25,000 cars, competition from China. I was talking yesterday about motors. So motors in a car cost $5,000 a car. That's what the normal, these 100-year-old companies cost them $5,000. We can make a motor for $1,000. Costs $5,000. So they get.
Yeah, but then you have to have a battery that's more expensive.
Oh no, I'm talking about if you're making the internal combustion engine cars. I'm just talking about how stagnant businesses become and how used they are to operating the way they've always operated. That they don't look for new things to do, new ways to operate. Operating oriented toward making things cheaper. He can do things for $1,000 that other people cost $5,000. It's amazing. All I'm pointing out is that people get entrenched and they do things without trying to make the things better and cheaper and faster all the time. There's no incentive to do that. So Munger says, show me the incentives and I'll show you how people act. But the idea is that that's the reason stock's down. And now
So what's the reason it's going to go up and when?
Oh, it's going to go up huge.
When?
And now. I mean, now is the bottom.
Okay.
And so what they're doing is they're going into robo-taxis, and they're going to make the low-cost car. So they're making the low-cost car, except they're making it, they have excess capacity right now. They have capacity to make 3 million cars a year. They're making 1.8 million. So the 1.2 million cars they can make extra in an existing facility with no more capital, and they're not going to make the cars direct cost as cheaply as they did before, as they expected to. But overall, until they expect to do 5 million of these new cars.
What you think the genuine timing of a robo-taxi that's reliant on cameras only, and this has always been the question about, can you do it with just cameras relative to what Waymo and Cruise have done? What's your timing? But just give me the timing. That's the whole game.
Now.
Now?
Now. It's now.
We invested in it between 2014 and 2016. We invested $300 million, $320 million for 1.6 million shares. At that time, it's now 8 million shares. 5-for-1 split, so it's $40 a share, as you said. And the stock's now 400 or 420. And when we invested, and I was on your program, I was talking about how I believe we would make 20 times our money over 10 or 15 years. And so far, in the first 4 or 5 years that we've owned it, the stock went up and down like a yo-yo, and that would be expected because what they were doing is they were building facilities, hiring people, coming up with design. It's a reasonable thing to bet against them. All these car companies, 50 of them have failed, and this guy somehow had made it through sheer willpower and raised capital. Now he has 50,000 employees, and he has factories he's building on 3. I want to get to Tesla too, and I want to answer your news question. But Tesla's now building on 3 different continents, building in the United States, building in China, building in Germany, and you should expect more factories to be built continuously over the next 10 years. What we worry about are not stock prices. When we're an investor in a business, we worry about the business. And the short term, I can't have any clue about what's going to happen. I do think that it's now a $400 billion market cap. It was $40 billion when we started. I've said for a long time, I thought it was going to be $1 to 2 trillion. With what developments have taken place recently, I think 2 trillion is the right number. So I think it's 5 times from here. Made 10 times in the past 2 or 3 years, but for 4 years before that, the stock didn't change, and the business grew tenfold. So the business went from 2.8 billion to 30 billion 10 times. The stock price didn't change. Now the stock price just caught up to where they were. Now I think that the business is going to go from 30 or 35 billion in sales, grow 50% a year. I think they're going to be doing 5 or 6 or 7 or $800 million in sales in 10 years on just the cars. And the batteries is another unbelievable business, which I'm very excited about. And I think that with that kind of valuation, with that kind of results, you're going to see a 5 times appreciation. I was thinking 3 to 5 times. We made 10 times so far, 3 to 5 times to come in the next 10 years. Two more doubles, maybe 3 more doubles in 10 years. So
you think this is just the beginning for Tesla, meaning what?
Yeah, so they did 310,000 cars in the quarter, and people said, well, they should have done 317,000 cars in the quarter. And but at the plant in China was closed for 4 or 5 days, and there's supply chain problems in this period of time. And so everyone's focused on with this quarter for 310,000 cars. In 4 years, 3 years, they're going to be doing $1 million a quarter, not 310,000. 1 million cars a quarter. And if you go 10 years, they're going to be doing something like 5 million cars a quarter. So here you are doing 310,000 cars, and people saying a few thousand more, a few thousand less. I'm thinking about in 8 or 10 years, this is 20 million car company.
You expect to still be an investor in 8 to 10 years?
Yes.
Are you selling any more shares?
Periodically, if people say, if it gets crazy big relative to the size of the fund right now than I would. I own 1.25 million shares for our firm in the company. I have not sold a single share of that, and I don't expect to. And the same thing with SpaceX. So I think we're going to make 3 or 4 or 5 times our money in the next 10 years in Tesla. And I think it's
again from on top of the 20 that you've made.
And in the case of SpaceX, I think over the next 10 years, we're probably going to make 20 or 30 times our money. I want to talk about this. And so when everyone else has launch costs of $100 million, $200 million, $300 million per rocket, and they use it one time and then it burns up, our guy sends up his rockets, brings it back down and uses them over and over again. So his cost is a tiny fraction of the cost of a rocket.